Think about the last group conversation you were in. There was probably someone talking a lot, filling every gap, jumping into every pause, making sure their presence was felt. And there was probably someone quieter, someone sitting back, listening, watching. Most people's attention goes to the talker. That's natural. Noise draws the eye. But here's what psychology tells us. The person you should actually be paying attention to, the one collecting the most useful information, forming the clearest picture of what's really happening in that room, is almost certainly the quiet one. Today we're going to break down why talking less and observing more is not a social weakness. It's not shyness. It's not a lack of confidence. It is, according to psychology, one of the highest functioning cognitive habits a person can develop. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why and what it means for how you navigate every room you walk into. Let's start with something called the illusion of transparency. This is a well-documented cognitive bias where people significantly overestimate how much of their internal thoughts and feelings are visible to others. In other words, when you're nervous, you think everyone can tell. When you're excited, you assume it's obvious. When you have something figured out, you feel like it shows. People who talk a lot in social situations are often, without realizing it, constantly broadcasting. They're sharing opinions before they've fully formed them. They're revealing what they know and what they don't know. They're showing their emotional state, their insecurities, their assumptions all in real time, in the open, for anyone paying attention to read. The quiet observer, they're taking all of that in and giving very little back in return. That asymmetry, receiving more information than you emit, is the foundation of what we could call observational intelligence. Observational intelligence is the ability to read a situation, a person, or a dynamic more accurately than others because you've prioritized input over output. While someone is talking, they are, by definition, not fully listening. The human brain cannot simultaneously construct speech and deeply process what it's hearing. There's a trade-off. Every moment you spend forming your next sentence is a moment you're not fully absorbing what the other person is communicating. Quiet people sidestep that trade-off. Because they're not preparing to speak, their full cognitive bandwidth is available for observation. And what they're observing goes far beyond the words being said. They're reading body language, the micro-expressions, the posture shifts, the way someone's eyes move when they're saying something they don't fully believe. They're tracking tone, noticing when someone's words say one thing and their voice carries something else entirely. They're watching behavior patterns. Who looks to whom when a decision is made? Who tenses when a certain topic comes up? Who laughs a moment too late? These are signals that most people in the room are completely missing. Not because they're less intelligent, but because they're too busy generating output to process input. The quiet observer collects all of it. There's a concept in cognitive psychology called cognitive load. It refers to the amount of mental effort being used at any given moment. Every task, speaking, listening, thinking, processing, draws from the same limited pool of mental resources. When you're talking, especially in a social context where you're also managing how you're being perceived, your cognitive load is extremely high. You're constructing sentences, monitoring reactions, adjusting your tone, managing your image, and trying to make your point all at once. Very little bandwidth is left for deep observation. When you're quiet, your cognitive load drops significantly, and into that space, that mental gap, something important becomes possible: deep processing. Deep processing is what allows you to connect dots that others miss, to notice that what someone said 5 minutes ago contradicts what they're saying now, to sense the tension in a room before it becomes visible, to understand the real dynamic underneath the surface conversation. This is not magic. It's simply what the brain can do when it isn't overloaded with the task of performing. Now let's talk about something that rarely gets discussed in conversations about silence and intelligence: Unpredictability. When someone talks a lot, you learn them quickly. You learn their opinions, their triggers, their insecurities, their patterns of reasoning. You learn how they react to challenge, how they respond to flattery, what makes them defensive, what makes them open up. All of that information is incredibly useful to the people around them. A quiet person reveals far less, and in any kind of social, professional, or interpersonal dynamic, the person who is harder to read holds a natural advantage. Not because they're being strategic or manipulative, but simply because less information means less leverage for others to use. This connects to a psychological principle sometimes called information asymmetry. In any exchange, the party with more information tends to be in the stronger position. The quiet observer consistently holds more information about the room than the room holds about them. That gap is a form of quiet power that most people never consciously develop. There's also the matter of what silence does to your own thinking. Research in cognitive neuroscience has shown that the brain's default mode network, the network that activates when we're not focused on external tasks, plays a critical role in self-reflection, empathy, and complex problem-solving. It's the part of the brain responsible for connecting past experiences to present situations, for imagining how others might be thinking and feeling, and for generating the kind of insight that doesn't come from deliberate effort, but from quiet, internal processing. This network is most active when we are not speaking, not performing, not filling silence. It needs space. It needs quiet. And people who habitually talk less, who are comfortable with silence, who don't feel compelled to fill every gap, give their brain more access to this network on a regular basis. Over time, this isn't just a communication style. It becomes a cognitive advantage. The habit of silence quite literally trains the brain to think more deeply. And this brings us to one of the most important reframes in this entire conversation. Silence is almost universally misread. In most social contexts, the person who isn't talking much gets interpreted as shy, disengaged, or lacking in confidence. And sometimes that's true, but often, especially among high-functioning, highly self-aware individuals, silence is something else entirely. It's restraint. It's the choice to listen before speaking, to understand before responding, to observe before concluding. These are not passive behaviors. They require more discipline, not less, than simply filling the air with words. There's a well-known idea attributed to various thinkers across history. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It's almost a cliché at this point, but the psychology behind it is real. Information flows in through listening. Wisdom comes from processing what you've taken in. And the person who speaks only after they've truly listened and observed is almost always the person whose words carry the most weight when they do speak. So what does all of this mean practically? It means that the next time you're in a room and you feel the urge to fill the silence, pause. Notice that urge. Ask yourself, am I speaking because I have something genuinely valuable to add? Or am I speaking because silence feels uncomfortable? It means paying attention to what you can observe when you're not performing. Watch how people behave when they think no one is really watching. Listen for what isn't being said. Notice who controls the room without raising their voice. And it means understanding that quietness in the right context is not something to apologize for or work on fixing. It may be one of the most underrated forms of social and cognitive intelligence there is. The loudest person in the room gets the attention, but the quietest one is often the one who truly understands what's happening in it. If this gave you something to think about, I'd love to hear your perspective.